While governments across the globe struggle to keep their aging bridges from collapsing under the weight of skyrocketing steel and concrete prices, a forgotten nation in West Africa has quietly done the unthinkable. In a time when infrastructure seems like a luxury only rich countries can afford, Burkina Faso, one of the poorest nations on earth, has shocked the world with a construction method so radical, so absurdly simple, that even engineers in Beijing are now taking notes. And at the center of this revolution is one man, President Ibrahim Traoré, known for bold ideas that often sound more like myths than policies. From reviving desert ecosystems to building artificial rivers, Traoré has now unveiled something truly extraordinary. A $1 million bridge built almost entirely from used car tires. That's right. While the world sees discarded rubber as waste, Traoré sees structure, strength, and strategy. He's not just recycling tires, he's redefining national resilience. In this video, we'll take you inside the groundbreaking method that's already transforming rural life in Burkina Faso. Explore how it's drawing global attention, and ask, is this the future of infrastructure for a struggling planet? Or is this just a fleeting miracle in a land that dares to dream differently? At first, it almost feels like a joke. A bridge made from used tires? In a world obsessed with sleek skyscrapers and shimmering highways, the very idea sounds like something out of a child's imagination. But the deeper you look, the more it makes sense, and the more it makes you wonder why no one thought of it sooner. In a dusty corner of West Africa, where funding is scarce and resources are thinner than dreams, President Ibrahim Traoré has taken what the world throws away, literally, and turned it into the foundation of his country's future. This isn't some eco-experiment tucked away in a university lab. This is real. This is functioning. And it's changing lives every single day. Imagine this. A team of local workers begins by leveling the land, not with $1 million machines, but with tools passed from hand to hand. Shovels, ropes, and iron will. Once the earth is flattened and compacted, they lay the foundation, mixing sand and cement to create a platform strong enough to bear the weight of progress. Then come the tires, thousands of them. Not brand new, not imported, just the cast-offs from cities, villages, and junkyards. Each tire is carefully placed in line, fitted tightly against its neighbor, and fastened with bolts and wire. There's no room for weakness here. These aren't just tires anymore. They are building blocks, circular, resilient, and ready for transformation. Inside each tire, cement is poured and allowed to harden. It seeps into every crevice, bonding with the rubber like bone to flesh. Once cured, these concrete-filled tires become as strong as stone. Workers stack them in rows, layering them like bricks, one atop the other, side by side, forming the walls and pillars that will support the bridge. Every layer is reinforced with more cement, and where the stress is greatest, under support columns or in the center span, extra layers are added, sometimes double, even triple, creating a density of material that rivals traditional concrete and steel. On top, wooden or metal molds are laid out and filled again with cement, forming the bridge's surface. Mesh wire is added to strengthen the mix, preventing cracks and absorbing shocks from the vehicles that will eventually pass. When it all dries and settles, you're left with something remarkable. A bridge made from trash, standing tall and proud, durable enough to handle trucks, buses, and the beating sun of West Africa. But here's where the story gets truly extraordinary. This isn't just a clever design. This isn't just a budget solution. This is a revolutionary act, a statement that says, loud and clear, that a nation doesn't need to beg for aid, doesn't need to wait for rich donors or foreign experts to show up with blueprints and promises. Ibrahim Traoré has shown his people and the world that sometimes the answers aren't far away. Sometimes they're sitting right under our feet, in landfills, in backyards, in the forgotten corners of yesterday's waste. And more than that, he's shown that innovation isn't the property of the wealthy. It belongs to those who dare to see the ordinary in a new light. For every dollar saved on imported steel, there's a child who gets to cross that bridge to school. For every day shaved off construction time, there's a farmer who reaches the market before his produce spoils. These bridges, humble in material but rich in purpose, are not just paths over water or valleys. They are lifelines. They are proof that progress doesn't have to look like glass towers or billion-dollar bullet trains. Sometimes it looks like a rubber tire filled with cement, laid down with care and purpose by hands that never gave up. And that, right there, is the genius of it. While the rest of the world debates budgets, delays, and infrastructure bills stuck in political limbo, Burkina Faso is building, quietly, efficiently, boldly. Using the materials no one else wants, Traoré is creating something no one else imagined. A bridge not just for traffic, but for hope, dignity, and national pride. And it all starts with something as simple, as overlooked, as a tire. The turning point came not when the bridge was finished, but when the world began to notice. It started slowly, just a few curious engineers from nearby countries, quietly taking notes, snapping pictures, asking questions. But then the whispers turned into headlines. International journalists flew in, stumbling over dust roads and local dialects, just to stand on a structure made of what their own cities pay to burn. They couldn't believe it. They walked across the tire bridge, bounced gently on its rubber-infused surface, and stared at its concrete heart. What they saw wasn't fragile. It was solid, sound, and shockingly beautiful in its simplicity. Within weeks, university researchers across Europe and Asia began requesting construction data. Think tanks in Germany labeled it a frontier model for ecological infrastructure. Sustainable design forums in the United States added it to their global innovation watch lists. But the loudest reaction of all came from a place no one expected. China, the very symbol of modern infrastructure, the land of megabridges and endless expressways. China didn't just praise the project. They sent people. Technical teams from major Chinese construction institutes visited Burkina Faso. They examined the materials. They watched the process. And then they took the blueprint home. Before long, early-stage tire bridge projects began showing up on the outskirts of Shanghai, and soon after, in smaller industrial zones where waste management and low-cost infrastructure were a real concern. What began as an African experiment was now being replicated by the very powers once seen as unreachable. That was the moment the world changed. For the people of Burkina Faso, it was validation. A quiet revolution had turned global. For decades they'd been told to copy, to follow, to borrow. Suddenly the tables had turned. Now it was the world that was watching them, learning from them, asking how. Not why, not if, but how. And for Ibrahim Traoré, it was personal. This was no accident. This was vision. A vision rooted not in fantasy, but in defiance. Defiance of the belief that innovation only comes from wealthy countries, that progress must come with debt, that developing nations must wait their turn. Instead, he had built a bridge, and that bridge had built something bigger: credibility. The global response wasn't just technological, it was emotional. Experts who once mocked the idea of rubber structures now called it resilient architecture. Environmentalists hailed it as a climate-positive engineering miracle. Economists, always skeptical, began running models and discovered that using tires instead of steel could reduce infrastructure costs by up to 60% in certain regions. That's not a margin. That's a game changer. Even social movements picked up the story. Climate advocates pointed to the project as an example of real-world circular economy. No slogans, no policies, just action. Poverty activists saw it as proof that innovation doesn't wait for permission. That ingenuity often comes from places with the least to lose and the most to gain. In one particularly moving moment, a young woman from Nairobi, a civil engineering student, posted a video on social media saying, "I used to dream of studying in France to learn infrastructure. Now I dream of going to Burkina Faso." Her post went viral, and with it, so did a sense of something far more powerful than bricks and mortar: pride. Because when one country builds something the world didn't believe possible, it doesn't just shift policy, it shifts the imagination. And that's the moment when the bridge, just a humble structure in a remote corner of Africa, became something else entirely. It became a symbol, a challenge, a question hanging in the air for every engineer, every policymaker, every citizen in every corner of the world. If they can do this there, what's stopping us here? Long before this bridge caught the world's eye, its impact had already begun to ripple through the quiet villages and forgotten farmlands of Burkina Faso. For the families who live far from paved roads or steady electricity, the change wasn't theoretical, it was personal. Before the bridge, a sick child had to be carried across unstable footpaths to reach the nearest clinic. After the bridge, an ambulance could drive straight to the village. Before the bridge, farmers struggled to move their crops across muddy creeks and broken trails. After the bridge, they loaded produce onto carts and trucks that could now reach the market on time. The transformation wasn't just about transportation. It was about time, dignity, and opportunity. In many of these rural communities, the bridge became a gathering place. Children ran across it, giggling, amazed at the strange black walls beneath their feet. Elders walked slowly over it, some whispering prayers of gratitude. Young men and women who once scavenged tires to sell for scrap were now being paid to collect, clean, and prepare those same tires for construction. For the first time in years, they had stable work, not just a job, but a purpose. Something to build, something to be proud of. This wasn't just infrastructure, this was identity, and politically it changed everything. Ibrahim Traoré's government didn't just fund a bridge. They funded a new story about what was possible in a country long dismissed as poor, unstable, and dependent. The Ministry of Labor launched training programs to teach this construction method nationwide. The Ministry of Education partnered with universities to incorporate it into civil engineering curricula. What began as a local project was suddenly a national strategy. Opposition voices, once critical of Traoré's bold experiments, found themselves out of breath. The results were too visible, too tangible. Roads made of rubber that didn't crack in the rain. Bridges that didn't collapse under load. Towns that now had access to hospitals, schools, and city centers. The usual political arguments faded in the presence of real progress. And beneath it all, something even more powerful was growing. Trust. Not blind faith, not political allegiance, but a cautious, growing belief that maybe, just maybe, this leader wasn't like the others. That maybe he meant what he said. That maybe, for once, someone was building not for photo ops or foreign praise, but for the people who actually lived there. Of course, not everything was perfect. There were logistical challenges. Some regions lacked proper coordination. In certain areas, local officials mismanaged resources or delayed implementation. But the difference was that people now cared. Citizens started demanding better oversight. Not because they were angry, but because they believed it mattered. Because the bridge had shown them that things could be different. In a country long burdened by coups, colonialism, and corruption, this shift in public mindset was nothing short of revolutionary. Traoré didn't just give them a road. He gave them a reason to pay attention, to participate, to believe again. And that belief began reaching beyond borders. Other African nations started sending delegates. Construction firms in Kenya, Ghana, and even parts of Latin America requested blueprints. It was no longer just about one bridge or one road. It was a proof of concept for a continental movement, one that said, we don't have to wait. We can build now, with our hands, with what we have. And back in Burkina Faso, the political tide had turned. For the first time in years, approval ratings surged. Not because of slogans, but because of cement, because of tires. Because people didn't just hear promises, they walked across them. From the American vantage point, the story of a bridge made of tires in Burkina Faso may seem like a curious footnote. Something clever, maybe admirable, but far removed from the world of advanced engineering and trillion-dollar budgets. But for those paying closer attention, this project isn't just a local innovation. It's a quiet warning, a wake-up call. Because in a time when America is pouring billions into repairing crumbling highways, battling political deadlock over infrastructure bills, and watching inflation drive up the cost of every single bolt and beam, a country like Burkina Faso is building with scraps, with speed, with soul, and the question begins to burn. Why aren't we doing the same? In recent years, American discourse around infrastructure has centered on modernization, climate sustainability, and equity. Yet many communities, rural towns, underserved neighborhoods, tribal lands, are still waiting for the most basic repairs. They don't need glass tunnels or high-speed trains. They need access. They need connection. And here comes a model, simple but sturdy, cheap but dignified, that achieves exactly that. Not as a futuristic dream, but as a functioning reality. Today, some engineers in the U.S. have quietly taken note. Sustainability think tanks have begun to discuss the rubber bridge method in closed panels, but broader adoption is slow, partly due to bureaucracy, partly due to pride. It's hard to admit that a developing nation might be doing something better. Not just differently, but more effectively. Yet this is precisely the moment when America must look beyond its borders. Not to give aid, but to learn. And globally, that shift is already underway. From Latin America to Southeast Asia, municipalities are exploring this model not as charity, but as a practical roadmap for building faster, greener, and cheaper. Burkina Faso has sent the world a message, without speeches, without campaigns. Just one bridge, one solution. And for anyone paying attention, it speaks volumes. Progress doesn't always wear a suit and tie. Sometimes it's dusty. Sometimes it smells like rubber. But it works, and it moves people, literally and spiritually, forward. So now we're left with a question, not just about bridges or rubber or West Africa, but about vision. What kind of future are we building, and who do we believe is allowed to lead it? Because what President Ibrahim Traoré has done in Burkina Faso goes far beyond infrastructure. He's dared to ask a different question, one we often forget. What if the solution isn't to wait for help, but to start with what we already have? What if the most powerful innovation doesn't come from billion-dollar labs, but from the courage to do things differently? In a world drowning in waste, in doubt, in delay, he turned to discarded tires and built a bridge of hope. A bridge that connects more than villages. It connects belief to reality. And now, that same bridge is asking the rest of us, will you follow, or will you keep waiting? For every American watching this, especially those who've seen factories close, roads crumble, and promises fade, maybe this story from Burkina Faso isn't foreign at all. Maybe it's a mirror. Maybe it's a reminder that dignity doesn't come from wealth, but from will. That leadership isn't about noise, it's about action. And that sometimes, the answer comes from where you least expect it. So I ask you this. Do you think that President Ibrahim Traoré's national reform strategies are truly effective yet? Or should the world consider supporting someone else to succeed him? And deeper still, can we afford to keep ignoring the voices that are building the future from the ground up? Please share if you feel that you are one of the first to know about and support President Ibrahim Traoré. Subscribe if you believe that the truth is more important than the headlines. And comment below. Do you think tire bridges and rubber roads can change the world? Or is this miracle something only Burkina Faso can own? Your voice matters, because stories like these don't just deserve to be heard. They deserve to be built upon.